listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Marie Murphy and I'm a non-judgmental infidelity coach. If you are having an affair or cheating on your partner or engaging in anything that you think counts as infidelity, I can help you deal with your feelings, clarify what you want, and make decisions about what you're going to do. No shame, no blame, no judgments. When you are ready to start dealing with your infidelity situation in a way that's truly right for you, I can help you do it. To learn about how you can have me as your coach, go to my website, mariemurphyphd.com. I can't wait to meet you. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with David Bedrick. David is an author, counselor, teacher, and attorney dedicated to transforming how we approach shame and suffering. He is the author of The Unshaming Way, a book lauded by Gabor Mate as a deep investigation of shame that offers a workable, practice-based, and accessible path to divesting ourselves from it. David's passion for this work stems from his own challenging childhood experiences. After 40 years of research and clinical practice, he founded the Santa Fe Institute for Shame-Based Studies, where he educates therapists, coaches, and healers. His unshaming paradigm treats life's difficulties as powerful invitations to insight, soul, and self-connection. David's embodied teaching style often brings students face-to-face with their own beauty and life purpose. A contributor to Psychology Today, he is also the author of 3 additional books with a new book coming in 2026. Hi, David. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Hi, Marie. Thank you. I hear my bio. I'm thinking, who's that?
Right? Who is this person?
I don't know. He keeps changing, Every time I try to hold him down, he sneaks out.
Wriggles away.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, listen, there are approximately 1 million things that I would like to discuss with you. But let's start here. As we all know, I work with clients who are engaging in infidelity as they define it, and many of them, as you might imagine, have gotten the message that not only is engaging in infidelity really bad, but they've also gotten the message that because they are engaging in infidelity, they themselves are really bad. And often, people have been explicitly told this by some sort of credentialed expert. Maybe they've read an article or a book or dozens of articles or books written by so-called experts that proclaim the badness of infidelity and the badness of people who engage in infidelity. And also, sometimes people have been told this directly by a professional who they have hired to help them, like their therapist. And I want to get your take on how we got here. How did we get to a place where modern psychology or big psychology and the therapeutic industrial complex and the offshoots thereof got into the business of shaming human behaviors that A, are very common and B, are very human?
I mean, I'm thinking of 2 things when you ask. There's probably more, but the first thing is morality, whether that's Judeo-Christian morality, that would be foundational in Western thinking, where most of what we think of psychology. Morality was not distinct from a lot of the viewpoints about what health looked like. Health with a tumor or something, most people would agree with, although shamanic cultures might not. But health psychologically, gender issues, sexual preference and identity issues, filled with morality. This is good, this is bad, this is diagnosable, right? If you're from a man loving another man and was sexually moved and turned on by that, that would be diagnosable at one point. So that's not an illness, that's a moral viewpoint, right? And that's shot through our ideas about normality. And then medicine, psychology in the West, again, has a medicine as its roots. Western medicine, European medicine, male patriarchal medicine at its white patriarchal medicine at its root. And that means If we can take something and remove it from you, then you're healed. So that's simple. Again, like a infection in my finger. If you can give me an antibiotic or put something ointment on it or clean it up and the infection goes away, I'm healed. So that notion, the allopathic notion, healing means the removal of symptoms as opposed to the investigation of symptoms for their intelligence, meaning, learning about yourself, that dominates. So those two things dominate the healing space. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about what this means, because I'm a sociologist by training. I studied the production of knowledge about sexuality and how, the medical profession, came to be what it is in the Western sense and how that influenced common thinking about human sexuality. So I'm with you, but let's tease this out a little bit for folks who may not have a background like ours. You point to something really important. It's not just that morality infuses psychology and therapeutic thinking. It's a particular version of morality, right? It's a version of morality that sees good and bad and right and wrong. It sees black and white. It sees normal and abnormal. It's a very dualistic morality that has informed psychology, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking as we're talking, I'm remembering a teacher. He was a therapist, but I called him a teacher because that's what his main function in my life was. But I remember telling him, his name was Arnie. I remember saying, Arnie, I was sitting in a cafe and I was attracted to this other woman. Listen to I was attracted. That's bad. I was feeling. What should I do about that? It was, I don't know how I said that, but that was what I was. Well, I'm confused. What do I do about that? I have been married for many years. And he said, oh, you were attracted? What did that feel like? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's an interesting question. I wasn't thinking about that. And I was like, well, I don't know. It's confusing. It's upsetting. And he said, no, what does it feel like to be attracted? Not what does it feel like to be confused about it? And that was really, touches me. It was so beautiful and simple that he was interested in my body's experience of being turned on. What I should do with that, we can talk about that. But just that aspect. So then which I did, if I had a sense of that is not okay somehow in my idea of being married, that ought to be suppressed somehow, put aside, marginalized somehow, then where does that go? And what does that impact?
Mm-hmm.
In my marriage, what does that impact? As me, as a person who's turned on by all kinds of things, where does that energy go? Am I going to look for things online that turn me on? What am I going to do? Am I going to be a little bit more depressed that way? What will happen with that experience?
Yeah. And I mean, you work with more therapists than I do, but I work with a lot of clients who have been, shall we say, impacted by therapists who don't take that sort of approach, who don't say, okay, you're attracted to someone else, or you're actually involved with someone else, and yet you're in a committed relationship. What's that like for you? Instead, they say, just stop doing it. Let's remove that. Let's just excise that from the whole situation, and then you'll be fine. And that's all they get.
Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, for some people, that's going to be good medicine, I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
Meaning their morality and ideas of religion and what's right and wrong are so strong that I'm not going to do anything that's going to open that as if it should be, right? And then that idea, this is what you should do to get rid of that, to make sure that doesn't happen so you don't injure your relationship and become a bad person. If that's super strong, I won't be able to mess with that. With one caveat, if they're insisting on some fundamental belief to live by, that's okay. And it doesn't work over and over and over, then at least I can hang on to that. Well, I'm not against your morality, but something in you doesn't go along about that. I can't tell you what you should do, but we should at least learn about what's actually happening. So that would be a doorway past, if we could say, the block of this is right, this is wrong, I can't go any further.
Yeah.
What are you thinking? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm looking for your comment on what you see in the world of therapy. I don't see, well, I mean, for me, most of this is secondhand. It's me hearing my clients talk about their experience with their therapists, right? But what I see is that a lot of therapists can't get to the what's it like. They only get to this is wrong. Let's figure out how you can stop doing it. And what are your thoughts about, how how we got there and how can we get beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, it's the therapeutic world, and that's really important. And then the people who are coming to the therapeutic world, the coaches, the healers, the therapists, are coming with that paradigm already internalized, meaning, Marie, can you help me? Like I did with Arnie. Can you help me? I'm doing something bad. And then if you don't challenge that in any way or see through that, then you'll be like, okay, let me help you, right? Can you help me lose 20 pounds? Okay, I'll help you. Right? You won't say, what am I eating? What do I love to eat? Just if I say I shouldn't be attracted to other women, it's messing up my marriage, etc., I'm doing these wrong things, then you might not have a viewpoint that says, that's interesting, let me really understand that deeper. Let me not only be glued and fixated on their presentation, but use my professional insight, my knowledge, my wisdom to see through that so I can make sure I'm addressing the problem at a deeper level. If that's not happening, and many people that's not, then they're just going to be, okay, let's figure out how to do that. What does self-containment do? Can you release your energy some way through running? So can you meditate maybe so you're calmed down when you go outside? How are you going to be more detached about that? So take a deep breath when you're attracted to someone. I don't know if that's facetious, but here's techniques and protocols that will help.
That's the thing. I mean, I think that you're really onto something there. I mean, like that is the kind of bullshit guidance I hear people having received over and over. Like, oh, you're attracted to someone else. Just take a deep breath. Move on. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I bet you see this too amongst practitioners who you train.
Yeah, for sure. And you're making me think my wife just got a doctorate, and part of that was studying the internet and its effect on relationships and all this data about pornography. So then there's like this enormous culture that's probably always been, it just hasn't been the access, right? There's like enormous culture, and under, teens, maybe younger also, who have this incredible access to enormous information, images.
Yeah.
So it's like, so in some way, then still I'm loyal to a certain view. Now it's not only a person. Maybe I'm 16 and I'm not married to anybody or going steady or whatever, but I'm loyal to a certain view. But then off to the side, right? If we were Jungian, we would say in the shadows, whoever you want to call that, split off. Another aspect of myself is kind of secretly investigating my fantasies, my images, whatever, something, but I can't do that very consciously. So people are growing up in that kind of culture. Keep those things separate. There's something huge called pornography, huge meaning it's so vast in terms of the impact it's having over people and the billions of dollars of industry, et cetera. And yet it's off to the side. It's a bad thing. We think it's a bad thing. We can agree on it's having a bad effect on youth and girls, the way they're looked at, and so we can that, et cetera. But then the underlying difficulty, what is so good about this taste? Why do I want to put that needle in my arm and take that heroin? It must be really attractive if I'm willing to die for it. That question, the culture is not really addressing. Just say no, Nancy Reagan-ish,
Right. And so I'm curious, when you work with therapists, how do you help them get beyond the just say no?
Yeah. Some of my trainings are like year-long training. So, and then people come to me because they want to know something about what I call an unshaming perspective. So those people, it's easier because they're coming to me saying, I want to learn what you're offering. Mm-hmm. But then I always start by saying there's the essential question, and then we need tools to answer it. What's it like for you when you're depressed, when you're attracted to someone else, when you're turned on by someone else, when you're leaving the house to go see a lover, when you're with that person? What's it like for you? And then we need tools, often somatic tools, meaning the person has to feel in their bodies what it's like, because people have in their heads things that aren't. What's it like? It's anxious and scary and bad, and I feel terrible, and I hate myself. That's not what it's like to be with somebody that you want to be with, right? That's what it's like to feel criticized by what you're doing. But what's it actually like? Super rare question. So then we need tools for that. But teaching people to ask that question and get past that vision of how do we make this different? I work with all kinds of things. So if it's depression, I'm like, ask your client, what's it like? Well, they're depressed. But what's it like to be depressed? Some people, it's like a weight on their bodies. Some people, it's like they have no energy. Some people, it's like they wish they could ride on their bicycle. Those are, anyway, but I'm leaving the topic that's your center. But that would be the same thing. What's it like? So if somebody said to me, I don't work with individuals anymore, I am having an affair with someone, I would say, tell me about them. Tell me about them. And we're going to get to, well, I need to stop it. Okay, I'm going to try to help you do that. But before we do that, tell me about them. And when you're with that person, what's it like? And then feel it. And that's going to be an important thing. Helping other therapists, opening people's eyes to that depth question. Some people won't be. They have a protocol that they like, and people might want that protocol. Yeah, helping them do that would be useful. I'm trying to think of what else happens with therapists in that some people would just disagree with me and fight with me, I guess. If it was online and I said, we should be open to infidelity, don't judge people, then a whole bunch of people will criticize me.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
For better or worse. They'll be like, that's bad. And you know who those people will be? They'll be people who were injured by another person and need to say, rah, 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 I hate you, don't you ever. And then they need support to yell and scream and be upset and I don't know, whatever they need to do. So a lot of people, I guess that's the other thing. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud now. I guess another thing that's happened in the therapeutic world is we're so focused on the injured person, which needs to be the abused person, the traumatized person needs to be more center in our lives because the culture itself marginalizes trauma and the great pains that people experience, minimizes it. That's great, a great pain. But then the therapeutic world, lots of compassion for the injured person. Great to have that. You've been hurt. I hear you. I want to support your reactions. But then something like the person who could injure, in this case, what you're talking about, somebody who could have an affair that hurt somebody, very, very rare that gets centered.
Right.
Yeah. I'm thinking out loud. I've kind of moved around. Break me off somehow. Yeah.
Well, I'll take what you just said. I mean, I hear this from clients all the time. Like some folks will be married and they will have had an affair in the very classic sort of stereotypical sense. And they'll tell their spouse, listen, this is what's been going on. Like I've been having an affair. I don't know what I want to do. Let's go to counseling. I want to figure this out together. And the counselor or the therapist will focus exclusively on the betrayed spouse. And I say that dramatically because we just are so, I would even say, fixated on the so-called injured party. And I don't say the so-called injured party to take anything away from the pain of being cheated on. I do not discount that experience for a second. But the way that we frame cheating as like victim and perpetrator.
Yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah.
It's just beyond. And I mean, in this world, if we do not have compassion for all players on the field or all parties in an equation, we are fucked. Like if we can't heal the whole, we can't heal any of the parts. And I don't think therapy, as I see it, tends to recognize that. What do you think about that?
I think it's so important. And again, the rise of focus, the activism it's taken, especially for women who've changed the therapeutic field to be focused on abuse of women, abuse of children. So the rise of the victimized person and their experience that's been marginalized. Well, I own you anyway, and then that's not really happening, or it's not a big deal, so they did this, and go back to that person and get hurt. So those moralities, which were so central. So then there's an activism built into the therapeutic world, at least in the West, that says, hey, wait a second, I have been abused, I have been hurt. This is not okay. So then that rises up. That's super important. So we can't miss that. And it's still becoming, with the Gabor Mates, et cetera, of the world and other people, Judith Herman, we want to make sure we include some of the women and people of color in there, Tracy West, woman of color, who's focusing on this. So these things are being highlighted, the injured aspect that's been so marginalized. But then we have that rising so much, it marginalizes other aspects of the story. So that's that particular thing. In couples work, true.
Can I interrupt real quick and just say, the other aspect of the story that you're referring to is another human being's experience. And what we're doing when we over-focus on the so-called betrayed party's experience or the so-called victim's experience. And I'm not downplaying the fact that people do horrible things to other humans, but there's this whole, idea that infidelity is abuse. Infidelity is intentional abuse. And I dispute that. And moreover, even if it was, if we don't have an interest in the humanity of the perpetrator or the so-called perpetrator, we're lost. We've got to have interest in everyone's humanity, not just the humanity of the so-called injured party.
I love that you're saying this. It's just, and the discussion point that we're on, in a sense, you could say one side says, no, right? You hurt me, or that person's hurting another if I'm on the outside. And that's, those groups are hurting these people. These people are minoritized in socially. That person's been hurt. That person's a child, that whatever. And no, Marie, that's wrong. You can't do that. You would hurt the injured person. You need to elevate and understand, right? There's something, and then something saying, yeah, but there's another person. There's a humanity on the other side. That's such a huge conversation. I'm not saying that there's a right side or a wrong side. That's such a huge conversation in the therapeutic world, in the social activist world. What do we do with that? There are perpetrating groups. As a Jewish person, I've struggled like hell in the last, for almost all my adult life with Israel and the politics and what's happening to Palestinian people. And in the last few years, it's been like, wow, like I went to Israel and loved being there. And I hate what's happening and what Israel is perpetrating to Palestinian people. I know I'm leaving that field, but it's this issue of like, there's somebody who has more power who can injure another party. And what does my compassion look like? And how will that tear me apart, especially if I feel a little bit connected to the perpetrating aspect as a male person, as a Jewish person, et cetera. This is a huge moral, ethical, psychological, even spiritual issue. So you're challenging that. You're on the edge of that. That's how I'm hearing you, to say, let's look at the humanity of the person who could be the person or group who could be the injuring party, at least in part. Whew. Now it's different, just to clarify, different if it's two people versus a nation state that has huge military. That's a slightly different dynamic.
I mean, it's interesting that you brought that up, because my spouse is Palestinian, and all day, every day, I hear about, the horrors of the Israeli state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't disagree. And yet, in my conceptualization of whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, whatever, I have as much compassion for Benjamin Netanyahu as I do for the Palestinian people. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, it has, you can hear the emotion in my voice. Like, it has taken a lot of reckoning with my own pain to be able to see the world that way.
Thank you for saying that.
And I mean, it's hard because like I get upset about the silliest acts of human folly, right? Somebody cuts me off in traffic and like I cry about it, right? And yet, if I don't love that person as much as I love myself, what do we have?
Yeah, that's a deep thing.
Sure is.
I think you're speaking to a smaller group of the population that I don't think wants to do it, able to. I'm not putting it down, where that's the next step. Because if I'll speak on the other side, if a person is like, I have a lot of injury that no one's even heard of ever before, I haven't even said a word, that person's not going to say, let me understand this other person, right? It's not going to be, their next step is not going to be that. It may be, but unlikely.
Unlikely is right. I 1000% agree.
Screw you fucking mess with me, I'm out the door.
That's it.
Raise your hand and I will call the police, whatever. And I will make sure people know, and I'm not going to take it. Enough is enough. So those empowerments also are needed, especially if a person has never or had a little bit of that dosage, right? I'm allowed to say, don't you dare.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
100%. 100%. And I mean, I'll be the first person to say, if someone is treating you in a way that you don't like, do something about it, right?
Yeah.
The compassion that I have for people that who are engaging in infidelity doesn't mean that I think that their partner should just be like, oh, no problem. It's no problem. It's fine. Like, you have every right, if you are being cheated on, to say, I am not interested in this. Thanks. Bye. But that's different from saying, you victimized me. You abused me. What are you going to do about that?
The popular language you're right, doesn't define abuse. Anyway, I won't get into that. But
oh God, yeah.
Clearly enough so that it's a word that I use because it has power to use it. And then if I'm teaching therapists, I'm going to say, if you have a couple that comes to you, and they're not open to, I call it unfolding, investigating the experience, the desires, the hungers, the pains of the person who has had the affair, then that couple's relationship is going to be quite limited to, I need to hold you accountable, and what are you going to do? That's not going to be, it'll unlikely that that will be sustainable, because if I'm having an affair or regularly or a significant one, that means there's something I'm getting that I'm looking for. We don't know what that is, something I'm getting, but that can be investigated. And me stopping being that way could be a momentary fix, but we should expect that energy, desire, hunger is part of my vitality, lives in me, and I'm going to have to figure out what to do with it. So a longer term therapeutic process is going to have to say, we need to eventually have room for that other side. And if a person says, I don't have room for that, I'll never understand them, then I would say you should go to individual therapy and get somebody who can listen and support you only. That's not only relationship work. Let's say if you're only upset for a long time, it's not like something's wrong with you. You have every right to be that way. Maybe you should leave that person. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but that's not a relationship process after a certain amount of back and forths on that level. At some point, we have to get to know that other person. Do you want to know that other person? Well, I guess not. I guess not. I want somebody who's more fits a mold. I think then you should go find someone who fits a mold. There probably are people who are like that. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting a mold, wanting a relationship to be a certain way, wanting to have a person who is a certain way. But you can't expect everyone to be that certain way.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I love what you're doing, and that you're focused on that, and that you're challenging that kind of dominant ethic. There's good people and bad people, and I don't just mean good and bad morally, but there are people who hurt other people, who victimize and injure people, and they have a certain humanity experience that's worthy of understanding, not just so they can be better people, but so that their lives unfold. Some people take out their violence mostly on themselves, so we don't see them as perpetrators. But if you look at my inner life, it's gotten a little better over 30 years. Sometimes it's not any better. Sometimes I still beat myself the way my father did, only I don't use a literal belt. I just use my words and self-beratement, but still quite a bit of violence going on in the inner world. Even though I might feel hurt by other people. What a deep thing you're looking at. What kind of resistance or approaches? You don't have to answer the question. You probably have talked about this, but how do you deal with a culture that would say, Marie, come on, like, rah, I've been hurt. Do they just not, do you just kind of go somewhere else? Or what do you do with that particular?
I mean, it depends. Like I get the nastiest messages that you can imagine.
I can imagine.
Right? And I also get you literally saved me from suicide type messages. So
wow. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't do anything else. Let's just put it that way. I deal with the sort of commentary, shall we say, in the manner that it is delivered. If I get a hateful message, I just delete it and I move on. If people actually want to talk about why I do what I do, and they're actually genuinely interested, and they're not just telling me to go to hell, I'm happy to do that, as we're doing. We're talking about why it's so important to see everyone's humanity, not just the humanity of the so-called victim, right?
You're in a great Jungian tradition, Carl Jung, not only, but the shadow of the culture.
Right.
There's those people, they're the people who are married to Epstein, and I'm not one of those. For a little bit, it's good to be, but...
Let me interrupt and say, please explain. I know what you're talking about, but not everyone listening to this is going to know. Explain what you mean by Jungian approach and the shadow of our culture. Talk about that a little bit.
I mean, Carl Jung named our split off aspects.
So tell people who Carl Jung is. Not everyone's going to know. Yeah.
Carl Jung was an Austrian? Was he Austrian? A Swiss.
I want to say Swiss, but I'm not 100% sure.
I think Swiss is right. I just remembered.
I'm going to Google it while we're talking.
Yeah, so he was a Swiss psychologist, post-Freud. He did looked at nighttime dreams, among other things. But one of the central tenets of his psychology is that we have a wholeness, and only we're willing to be some of that. So I'm wanting to be a good, kind person, and I'm not wanting to be mean and hurtful and resentful with my wife. So that's good. But then sometimes I hold my knees back for 2 years and I get mean and resentful, right? So the common moral position would be, I should get rid of that, as you're saying. And then the Jungians would say, Carl Jung would say, we should get to know that part of you and hopefully integrate it. Does that mean I should be mean with my wife? No, it means that the energy behind that meanness, I want what I want, needs to come in more. I don't have to be meaner, but I shouldn't have spent 2 years putting my needs away. And that mean part has a little bit of force, and I might have needed not the meanness, but the energy, the force, the push, the drive, the self-interest, things like that. So common moral positions are, like you said, this is good, this is bad, get rid of the bad. And then a psychological position, a la Carl Jung, would say, those things you're looking at as bad, those are part of our humanity. And if you quarantine them, imprison them, marginalize them in some way, demonize them,
Repress, reject,
pathologize and diagnose them, they will find their way. So he said that's not a long-term ethical strategy to suppress and try to make something go away. A long-term is for you to get to know yourself, become more whole, and then more accountable for all the ways you are. And then you can trust me, because I can say, Marie, no way. This is not okay. And if I can't say that, you should expect me to not show up for the next meeting, or to give you a little elbow jab, or, so to speak, in words, or you should expect that to come out in a certain way. So it would not be sustainable. You should expect the person to erupt and have a bad mood. You just expect the country to say we're nonviolent and then bomb other people. We should expect leaders to say we want peace and then act brutally. We should expect all those things because they're energies, they're uninhabited. I'm not accountable for it. I guess that's to say, I didn't mean it, Marie. Well, David, that's the 4th time you did that with me. I don't mean any of those. Well, somebody in you keeps doing that to me, right? So that would be a deeper sense of ethic. So with sexuality in general, which is so much shame, meaning let's put it in the shadow. One of my teachers called it the shadow bag. Let me take my more radical sexuality, I put it in the shadow bag. Let me take it's all about me. I should be more selfish. Let me put that in the shadow. Let me take my space taking up as a woman. Let me put that in the shadow bag. And then we walk around with this big, heavy bag of all our put away parts, right? That weigh us down and depress us, and et cetera. Anyway, that's enough of a sense about that.
Yeah. The way I like to think about Jung's conception of the shadow, and by the way, I looked it up. He is Swiss.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Fun fact. I like to think about his notion of the shadow as the things that we don't want to look at, don't want to deal with. We know they're there, but we wish they weren't. And to your point, we do this individually and collectively. Mm-hmm. And infidelity is one of those things that collectively we just don't want to look at it. We want to pretend like it doesn't exist. We just want to demonize the cheaters and leave it at that. But where the hell does that get us? And I think my opinion is the more that we recognize our wholeness, including the parts of ourselves that we might not like or that society might not like, the more that we can be radically accountable for ourselves, which may include saying I am this thing, or I have done this thing that you don't like, or I don't like, or they don't like. Yeah. And yet I remain human and worthy. Yeah. Worthy of whatever, right?
I'm thinking of William Butler Yeats. I can't remember the line about it, but he says something like, at some point I look into the mirror of malicious eyes, people looking at me and saying, David, you're really not such a great counselor person. You're like whatever, right? So I look into the mirror of malicious eyes and at some point see in the mirror, that's also me. Mm-hmm. He said, and if I can't, he says, then honor will find you in the wintry blast. It's like, then your honor is out the window in some way. So it's the ethical material you're talking about. How do I claim, own, explore these aspects of myself that the culture that I would per se I don't want to be, my wife says I don't want to be, that some part of me agrees I shouldn't be, and that the culture and the church and the rabbis and whatever also say I shouldn't be. that's quite a tall task to say, I'm still going to, Jung would say, individuate, get to know myself, even up against the value systems that I've internalized, which agree that I should get rid of those, right? Most of the people would agree that I should get rid of those. But you're also making me think about what's we've come to know in the Catholic Church in the last 20 years, has it been, since the sexuality issue has been, and we have to say, it's pedophilia in most cases. It's awful. It's disgusting. It is abusive, etc. So that should be, somebody should say, no, we won't let you do that. You can no longer wear the cloth and don the, etc. All that should be done. We should find that all the bad guys and root them out. And then we still have the question that you're bringing up and the question of the shadow. What do we do with an organization that tries to get rid of this, but it shows up in grosser, less accountable ways?
Yeah.
What do we do with this material? Can we make it go away by finding the thousands of priests that have been identified, thousands? Or is, once we get to thousands, are we thinking this looks like a system where certain things show up in really horrifying, violent ways, and they don't know what to do with this energy other than try to make it go away? Maybe the system's morality, this is good, this is bad, is not deep enough to make a sustainable solution. We should bring the Catholic Church to your therapy office, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And say, do therapy. And you should say, well, we have to find out more.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I 100% agree. And of course, this whole Epstein saga has really brought these kinds of questions to the fore. This happens. People do things to other humans that we collectively agree are quite unacceptable. And yet it keeps happening, and pretending like it doesn't happen or simply saying that it shouldn't happen isn't going to make it stop. If we want some kind of change here, and I 1,000% agree that, there is such a thing as unacceptable sexual behavior. 1,000% agree. And we see examples of it all the time. We can't wish it away. We have to get really radically compassionate with the fact that this happens, and yet figure out how to hold people accountable to behavior that we deem acceptable.
Huge. What a huge task and question.
Yeah.
You're facing. And then around generally that the shadows of the culture, how we use power and other kinds of things, but then sexuality, which has got, talk about the church, but I can't think of many religious institutions that are different, but there probably are some. But the moral condemnation makes it very difficult to explore something. I remember working with a woman. I'm going to shift some of the details. No one will know anyway, because there's many people who are like this, to make it general, because I didn't. Sometimes people give me, say, you can tell my specific story, but this is a story I know. It's not just one person's story. She had been institutionalized and believed that some spirits, religious spirits, were trying to be sexual with her, and they were evil. They were evil spirits. And she had grown up in a system where certain sexual impulses for her as a woman, in her culture, in her nation she grew up in, etc., was an evil thing. So whenever she had sexual impulses, she thought she was evil.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And not everyone's like that. But so what did she do with that? Her system split. Not everyone has such a psychotic episode around that where she would end up being institutionalized. Not that that's a good thing or bad. That's a whole nother discussion. But her system then makes this whole story about evil spirits that are trying to seduce her to be a sexual being. And I talked to a psychiatrist, a friend of mine who is a clinical director at an institution. And he said, that's a common story. There are many women who have these ideas about being sexually devoured and all these kind of things, and it's evil and stuff like that. And then the strong moral or almost fundamentalist attitude about that leads them to think they have a sexual impulse and I'm evil. They don't just think it's bad. They think I am evil. I am like possessed by something evil inside. And not everybody has that. Some people just feel bad about themselves. Not everyone, but that kind of split happens. And we have that whole religious system issue. Getting to know ourselves in the way you're suggesting, that's a very radical thing. It shouldn't have to be, but it's pretty radical. I'm not,
I agree. It is, and it shouldn't have to be.
Yeah.
100% agree. But I want to tie this back to something that you said a little while ago. When you're the one at war with yourself, how do you attend to the victim if you're also the perpetrator? And I'm not asking you to answer that. I'm just saying
that's okay.
that your comment illustrates how if we don't heal the whole, we can't heal the parts. Because, you know, in the cosmic scheme of things, we're always our own perpetrator to one degree or another, right? Yes, other people do things. Nation states do things. Like, I'm not disputing that for a moment. But at the core, we're the one doing things to ourselves. Right? We do the worst things to ourselves. And how do we deal with this victim-perpetrator dichotomy when it's all within us? And my answer to the question is we have to come up with another paradigm.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, inner work to me, that has an unshaming paradigm. If a person's hurting another or hurting themselves, everybody hurts themselves in some ways. If you listen to the inner life of people.
Sure. And everybody hurts other people in some ways too, even when we're not aware of it or intentionally doing it. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So if that's a central aspect, it would be good to get to know that's happening, so a person can show out loud. If I'm criticizing myself all the time, it would be good if I can say to you, let me tell you what it's like inside my life. But you're fucking up. Look at the clock. It's 12:51. You said you're going to end this. Are you at a good point? Maybe you shouldn't have spent so much time talking about this. The issues of Palestine has nothing to do with this particular.
No, it has everything to do with this.
Right? So that would be a critic that would be real. Can't just make that up, right? That would be how we could go on for a long time. So then you would kind of go, oh, I see what's living inside of you. So making that available so that what's inside, that violence outside, is good. And then other aspects of myself, how do you get to know the thing that's criticized? The person who says, I want to talk about all these social issues also, even though I think I'm supposed to do something else. I want to break those boundaries. Hopefully there would be enough interest in that I have the capacity for it to say, let's find out about that person. Let's find out about the person who doesn't have affairs, but stops himself from doing that. Who would do that? Who is that person? So we need some kind of paradigm and a holding. To me, like, what makes it more likely that a person is willing to do that investigation, that work, if we call it, is someone who doesn't hold a big bias in themselves. If I'm biased, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that is bad, but we better learn about it. You're not going to want to tell me anything because I'm basically your moral authority incarnate. That's not going to be so helpful. But if I say, that's so interesting, who is that? Can we put the opinions aside for a moment about what's right and wrong about that? I promise you will help you not hurt people. And but first, it's the way of framing that. But let's get to know that within the confines of this office, even if it's a person who's hurt children, within the confines of my time, I want to get to know who that is, not your judgments. What's it like to lift your hand that's going to smack that child? Show me the hand. Feel the energy inside of you. That's not about saying, isn't it good? I'm not drunk, meaning, go ahead, oh, cool. I'm thinking, we better get to know intimately who you are and what that lives in. Is there any way to live that energy? Does it belong? Do you never say anything to your kids until you get overwhelmed and then scream at them and then hit them? Those kinds of questions. So the holding tank for that, and that means inner work for you or I, meaning so that I'm not like, oh my gosh, that's disgusting, you're an asshole. If I think that, then I can't work. I think I can't work with you. Then you should become a therapist for the church or the temple or the mosque. I don't know what, but that inner work is really good. And then that capacity to see another person the way you are, that interests me. I wonder who you are. What is it like when you fall in love with someone? What's so delicious about that? Falling in love is like one of the greatest moments of our lives.
Yeah.
Some people say to me, I fell in love with the wrong person. And I always say, I'm sure you did. But before we do that, what's it like to fall in love? Well, this person, I'm not saying you should be with that person, then answer their text, ever see them again. But falling in love, I don't know if that was love. I don't know what it should be, but that feeling is so marvelous and wonderful to have. It's one of the greatest feelings. But these are feelings that we're not allowed to have because I already fell in love with somebody. So those kinds of things need a holding tank that says, oh, in love? Oh my gosh. Before we get to how disgusting that human being was, falling in love is like so beautiful. I want to know about falling in love for you. That would be almost unheard of question, because I ask people things like that and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? You know?
Right,
You know?
right, for
Yeah.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure. This is something that I think about a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think it takes for individuals to be willing to look at their own so-called shadow stuff?
It's a great question. I have three answers. The first is I don't know,
Sure.
meaning
Yeah.
not that I have ideas and I do know certain things, but it's a bigger question that I have an answer for, but
It's a huge question.
it needs multiple answers. But I think of two things. Some people, for some reason that I don't understand, seem to be generally more open to that. And I don't think they learned that. I think they're like that. Did they have a past life? I don't know. But I'm making that up because it's as if they came into the world and they're more open to certain things than other people in general. That's part of their nature. They're interested and curious. So they have that as a nature, but some people don't have that nature. Yeah, you're thinking
So
something.
curious is one of my answers. I think curiosity can come from a lot of things. It can come from a past life. It can come from your astrological makeup. It can come from your professional training. It can come from your life experience. It can come from a lot of things. But I think a lot of what people need to have if they want to look at their shadow stuff is curiosity. I think that's an essential ingredient. And I have one other answer, but you keep going first.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I know is for some folks, it takes a stimulating, intervening event in their life. Something big happens. I got cancer and I started thinking about dying, and oh shit. Right? Or I was an alcoholic and I was messing things up and I had to stop. Or I almost lost the person I loved. Sometimes it takes, you have to get hit pretty big for it to kind of go, okay, my worldview may have to get shaken up because it's been shaken up by, I lost that job and everything I wanted. I don't know, something like that can happen. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I haven't.
Yeah,
one
I
more.
agree.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes those precipitating events matter. But this is just, my succinct way of putting it. But what I think it boils down to, in addition to curiosity, is courage.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great word.
It's the willingness to do the scary thing, even though it's scary. And I think a lot of the times, maybe not a lot of times, sometimes precipitating events are what generate that or stimulate that within people. And sometimes people just have it or decide to have it. But I think personally, I'm speaking as an individual,
Yeah.
it's scary as hell
Yeah.
to look under, the hood. It's scary as hell to look at the things that you don't want to look at within yourself. And if you aren't willing to do that while you're scared, it just isn't going to happen.
Beautifully said. That's beautifully said.
Thanks.
Courage and curiosity. Those are qualities some people have more than others, but they can be cultivated, as you
100%.
know, doing smaller acts of courageousness. Is that the way I say it? You can build that. I can take more risks and be more courageous around certain things if I take some steps along the way. Some people just jump, and that's okay too, I guess.
Yep. Yeah.
But you can build those kind of things, being more honest in relationship with each other about who you are or your sexual fantasies or the things that we don't ever want to tell the person because they're going to feel hurt, or those kinds of things are really rich in relationship. The taboo things, and saying, I'm going to bring those forward. Having a culture around you, whether that's a family culture, a community culture, some kind of subculture that models and rewards, appreciates that kind of thing helps. So if we have a culture that appreciates people who say, I should never have done that, I made a mistake, that's going to be a culture that's going to make it a little bit less likely. Wouldn't it be great if some of the people, let's say from the people caught in the Epstein files, came out and said, I'm looking at this and I'm learning something. And if they would come out and teach and model. Now, of course, some people would just want to kill them and crucify them. And so that's going to be one part of the culture. And then they're going to have the ability to somehow wrestle with the fact that that person is a real person worthy of my contempt, and also a projective object for how much hatred I have for many other things. So that's going to be a hell of a task to say, I'm okay being the bad person in a culture. But it would be really interesting if somebody said,
it would be amazing.
I thought I could do it with impunity, but what I was doing, and not just I was doing something bad and I'm a bad person, but sort of like, let me look at what's actually happening. What was I willing to risk so much for? What was I getting out of that that was so important that I was willing to do something that most people would find immoral? Why did a Bill Clinton, what was I willing to risk my presidency and my life for? Because he was.
Right.
You say, well, I just thought I wasn't get caught. But somebody said, this blowjob is worth the whole thing.
Right.
So then I would think, I don't want to be provocative about the words, but then I would think if I were working with him, I'd think, tell me about how good that must be a really great experience you're getting. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's not sexual. Maybe it's power. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, you're willing to put it all up the grabs for that. It must be really powerful.
No, that's always my question too. Tell me about that blowjob.
Yeah, exactly.
You bet. And now, again, for the sake of time, I'm going to say this quickly, but I'd love to keep talking about this. I think you're right about culture. And I think that you and me and everyone else have not only the opportunity, but the duty to create that culture, to create a culture in which we can say, yes, I am human and I am deeply imperfect.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I can be accountable for my actions without demonizing myself. We can hold other people accountable for their actions without demonizing them. We can recognize the humanity in everyone.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautifully said. Thank you for doing that and saying that, and being the word is leader. I call it leader because people will follow. Being a leader in that, and with that intention of creating more of a deeper ethic in the culture that doesn't only divide the victims and perpetrators as much as that's needed, so that we can make a more whole and sustainable solution to some of the difficult issues. Social media loves the polarization as much of us do, right? These are wrong, this is right. So we love that. And so many people haven't had a voice. So it's very electrifying to take a stand on one side if you've never done it. And you're speaking so many stories about the kinds of things you're saying. And then within the shadow and the polarizations, and this is good and this is bad, and how do we make a curious and courageous culture around looking into these shadow aspects. It's a beautiful, more than beautiful, it's a needed vision. So yeah, just appreciating you and feeling
Thanks,
the kind of person I'm talking to, because I haven't spoken to you before.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want you to tell everyone who's listening how they can find you and learn more about you and your work.
Oh, okay. Well, I just started creating a new website. I'm really glad it's not fully done, but people start getting the homepages are much better than it was. I'm on Instagram and Facebook under my name, David, and my last name is Bedrick, Bedrick, like bedrock.
Except Bedrick.
It's except Bedrock. My childhood friends would call me Rocks or Bedrock or Rocks. I love being called Bedrock and Rocks. It was kind of fun
cool.
As a playful name. I've written 5 books. The 5th is coming out just in a month. It can be pre-ordered, but my last book is called The Unshaming Way. And that, as you mentioned, was praised by Gabor Mate, because I have a lot of interest in trauma and shame and trauma. So I was proud of that. And I think it's published in like 9 languages now. Yeah, or it's getting there. I'm not sure if the books are out, but in some of the countries it's out. Yeah, so and my website, if you just Google David Bedrick, you'll find the website, or find me in Instagram. And I have all kinds of courses and many free resources. You can YouTube me and find hour-long sessions that people have agreed to make public. You can see me working with people and what that looks like. I've written about 90 essays for Psychology Today. If you Google Psychology Today and David Bedrick, you'll find those. Those are also no cost. And then there's longer trainings, year-long trainings and things like that are quite costly. Yeah.
As they should be.
That's exactly, Yeah. But thanks for asking about that.
So nice talking to you. Thank you, David. All right, everybody. That's it for today. I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.